There are questions that seem simple, yet reach the deepest layers of the soul. Questions that have followed humanity from ancient times until today, asking why we live and what truly gives meaning to life. In the short journey between the two shores of birth and death, some choose to pursue fame, some seek material wealth, and some immerse themselves in pleasures. Yet when the lights of success go out, when the applause fades, when the intoxication of joy passes, there still remains a subtle emptiness that nothing can fill. That emptiness is not a sign of failure, but a gentle reminder from deep within that we are searching for meaning in the wrong place. We think that having more will bring happiness, but the more we cling, the more restless we become. Like a thirsty person drinking seawater, the more one drinks, the thirstier one becomes. So it is with humans. The more we chase desires, the more wearied the soul grows. The Buddha taught that the root cause of this emptiness is ignorance, the inability to see the true nature of life. We confuse means with ends, believing that external things will bring eternal happiness, yet they are impermanent, changing moment by moment. The peak of a human life is not in possessing much, but in seeing and living in accordance with the truth that all things arise and pass away. All feelings come and go, and only a mindful heart can remain steady in the rushing stream of life. The meaning of life is not measured by the number of years we live, but by each moment we are awake. A day lived with mindfulness and compassion is more precious than years adrift in aimless desire. When we open our hearts to the truth that all beings seek peace alike, when compassion is nurtured, when wisdom is illuminated, the emptiness within gradually disappears, replaced by wholeness and peace. This journey is not easy. It requires us to pause in the frantic pace of life, to dare to look deeply within, to face the pain and illusions we have held for years. Like a climber leaving behind excess baggage to move forward, the seeker of life's meaning must let go of greed, anger, and fear.
To find the purpose of life, we must understand that meaning cannot be given by anyone else. It is not found in praise or recognition from others, but in a state that blossoms from within when we live in harmony with our pure nature. Meaning exists when every act arises from love and wisdom, whether in a small gesture or a great work. Living meaningfully does not require grand deeds known by the whole world, but is in bringing a little light to someone each day, in easing even a small part of the suffering around us. A timely word of comfort, an anonymous act of kindness, a moment of sincere listening, all can become seeds of meaning. Looking deeper, we see that the purpose of one life is not separate from the purpose of all life. We are part of a great river, and each drop contributes to nourishing all beings. In living this way, we do not merely exist, but continue and renew the stream of love that has flowed for countless lifetimes. Meaning is not in a distant future, but right here in the present, in each breath and step. simply pausing to feel a leaf trembling in the wind, a bird's song in the morning, a grateful glance from a stranger, we realize life has always been whole. And then we understand that we live not just to satisfy personal desires, but to learn how to love, to share, to grow in spirit. When the heart is open, our joy is linked to the joy of others. Their suffering is our own. This deep empathy teaches us to cherish each moment and stop searching for answers outside ourselves. When the light of wisdom and compassion spreads, life is no longer a series of aimless days, but a journey rich with meaning. And at that moment, the question of why we live is no longer a mystery, but a simple, clear truth. We live to understand, to love, and to make this world a little less burdened by suffering.
Robin Williams is proof that even when one reaches the peak of fame, when money is no longer a concern, when professional success earns the admiration of the whole world, a person can still feel lonely and suffer if they cannot find a deeper meaning in life. He made millions laugh, yet deep inside, he carried sorrows that were hard to share. This shows that happiness is not an inevitable result of fame or wealth, nor is it found in applause or public recognition. Such things are like stage lights, brilliant but fleeting, leaving vast darkness behind if there is no inner light of peace. In the Buddha's teachings, lasting joy does not come from external factors, but arises from a calm and mindful heart. When the mind is still swayed by praise and blame, when it depends on what others think of us, then our happiness rests on impermanent things. The story of Robin Williams reminds us that we can make the whole world happy, but if we forget to nourish our own soul, the emptiness will grow. Many in society face this too, busy with work, goals, meetings, and social media, yet feeling lost when alone. This is because people often confuse outward connection with the deep connection of the heart. True connection is not just being physically present, but understanding, listening, and sharing with sincerity. The Buddha once taught that even if the whole world loves us, without compassion and wisdom in our hearts, we remain as lonely as a traveler crossing a desert. Fame and wealth, if not used to cultivate compassion and benefit others, become burdens. Robin Williams' life leaves a profound lesson. External success cannot replace inner growth. We must learn to care for our minds, to recognize and embrace our pain, to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to heal. True happiness is not when we are always smiling, but when we are at peace, even in the face of suffering. This requires practice. Just as an artist trains every movement, a practitioner must train each breath, thought, and word. When we slow down, appreciate small things, spend time in stillness, meditation, and listening to ourselves, the emptiness within will gradually be filled. And when we have found that peace, even if the stage lights go out, even if praise and blame change, we will not lose our happiness. Robin Williams made the world remember him for his talent, but if he had found peace in his heart, perhaps his story would have been different. This is not to regret, but to help each of us reflect.
to understand that the path to happiness is not climbing higher or running faster, but going deeper into the heart. When the heart is full of compassion and wisdom, when we cherish each breath and moment, then wherever we are, whatever we do, we are living a truly meaningful life.
The content can be seen through two levels of exploration. One from the perspective of modern psychology, and one from the ancient wisdom of the Buddha. The first level, psychology, explains why external achievements, no matter how dazzling, cannot bring lasting satisfaction. This phenomenon is called the hedonic adaptation, meaning that people quickly adjust to new conditions and return to their baseline level of happiness. When a goal is achieved, the initial excitement lasts only briefly, after which the mind seeks something newer, bigger. This repeated craving keeps us in a constant state of pursuit without ever feeling enough. In addition, social comparison makes it hard to enjoy what we have, as we often measure ourselves against others. Even with exceptional success, seeing someone surpass us in any way can spark feelings of inadequacy. Factors like the pressure to maintain an image, the fear of loss, and the emptiness of not knowing what comes next after a goal is achieved all make happiness fragile. The second level, the ancient wisdom of the Buddha, gives a deeper look into the root cause. He taught that all suffering arises from craving and ignorance. Craving is clinging to what we desire. Ignorance is not seeing the impermanent nature of all phenomena. When we base happiness on things that constantly change, we place ourselves in a cycle of disappointment. The Buddha showed that the true purpose of life is not to accumulate more, but to find freedom from suffering. This freedom does not depend on external conditions, but arises from mindfulness, from the ability to clearly see and let go of the mental chains that bind us. The path he taught is the Noble Eightfold Path, consisting of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are not merely ethical principles, but practical methods for liberation. When we understand that all things are temporary, we no longer cling as before. When the mind is free from greed, anger, and delusion, we experience a profound lightness. Happiness then no longer depends on everything going our way, but is peace even in the face of change and loss. Modern psychology can help us recognize the mechanism that keeps us from ever feeling satisfied. But the Buddha's wisdom goes further, showing us how to step out of that cycle. This is by turning inward to observe the mind, recognizing the cravings that drive us, seeing them arise and pass away. When practicing mindfulness, we are no longer swept away by the stream of thoughts and emotions, but become the awakened observer. This freedom from being identified with inner fluctuations is true happiness. And with this understanding,
we see that external achievements, though they have their value, are only means, not the ultimate goal. That goal is to live with a mind wide open, full of compassion and wisdom, so that every moment holds meaning and peace.
Modern society often promotes happiness as the ultimate goal of life and defines it through status, comfort, pleasure, or luxurious experiences. From social media to advertising, every message seems to tell us that if we own certain things, we will be happier. Yet the paradox of happiness shows that pursuing happiness directly often undermines it and can even lead to loneliness. When people focus too much on feeling happy, they become more sensitive to any sign of dissatisfaction and thus more aware of their unhappiness. Psychology has shown that an obsession with having to be happy can cause constant comparison to an unrealistic ideal, and when it is not achieved, the disappointment deepens. Moreover, excessive focus on the self can lead to disconnection, as everything is measured by personal benefit and how much joy it brings to oneself. This contradicts the natural connectedness of human beings, making many feel lonely even in a crowd. Over 2,000 years ago, the Buddha recognized the essence of this paradox, even if he did not name it in the language of modern science. He taught that happiness is the result of a life lived with mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom, not something to be grasped or possessed. When we chase happiness directly, we strengthen craving, and craving is the root of suffering. In contrast, when we let go of the idea of having to be happy, and instead focus on living mindfully, doing good, and cultivating loving kindness, happiness naturally arises, like flowers blooming when there is enough sun and rain. The paradox of happiness teaches us that the indirect path through giving, connection, and letting go is the shortest path to true peace. When happiness is no longer the goal, we are less disappointed by suffering, and we begin to see suffering as part of the human experience, helping us grow and deepen. In today's world, where everything is measured by efficiency and speed, we easily forget that happiness cannot be forced or optimized like a product. It requires slowing down, making space for stillness, and being fully present. The Buddha reminds us that true happiness cannot be separated from inner freedom. This freedom comes when we are no longer controlled by endless desires, no longer pulled by illusions of a perfect life defined by society's standards. When the heart knows contentment, letting go, and compassion, we touch a form of happiness that no paradox can shake. When happiness becomes a goal, it becomes like a moving target. Each time we think we have reached it, it moves a little farther away. It is like wanting a party to be perfect. We prepare every detail with care, hoping everything will be just right. But that very desire makes us tense and sometimes unable to enjoy the moment. The same psychology plays out in daily life. Each time we achieve something, the initial excitement quickly fades, replaced by emptiness or the urge to seek the next goal. Psychologists call this the cycle of adaptation, where the joy from an achievement exists only briefly before we return to our baseline or feel even more deflated than before. Happiness, if treated as a destination, will always keep us chasing, because the mind cannot stop when it is ruled by craving. Over 2,000 years ago, the Buddha pointed out the root of this restlessness. He taught that all feelings, even joy, are impermanent. When we cling to them, we suffer when they change. Like a child trying to hold on tightly to a balloon, the tighter the grip, the more likely it is to burst. Happiness is the same. Trying to preserve the initial thrill is impossible because the mind constantly shifts with conditions. In his teachings, lasting happiness is not an extreme emotional high, but inner peace, unshaken by gain or loss. When we stop seeing happiness as a goal to reach, we begin to notice it is already present in simple things: a morning bird song, a warm cup of tea, a deep breath. Practicing mindfulness helps us pause and return to the present experience instead of always looking toward a distant target. In doing so, each moment has its own value, regardless of whether it is perfect. The moving target of happiness stops shifting when we realize it is not ahead of us, but right under our feet. Awareness, gratitude, and compassion are the foundations that make joy steady, no longer swept away by the currents of change. When we let go of the idea of a perfect happiness, we begin to live truly, love deeply, and fully feel what we already have. This is when happiness returns in its most natural form, unforced, unconditional, and impossible to lose simply because circumstances change.
Research on the phenomenon of hedonic adaptation shows that even major life events, such as getting a promotion or winning the lottery, bring only temporary happiness. At first, these changes are accompanied by a strong sense of excitement. Everything seems brighter, more meaningful. But after a short while, the feeling fades and life returns to its usual state. Psychologists explain that people have a personal happiness set point, and when they experience major changes, whether positive or negative, their mood gradually adjusts back to that baseline. This explains why even after achieving a dream that seemed life-changing, we may find ourselves feeling much the same as before. The issue is not in the achievements or rewards themselves, but in the mind's tendency to adapt quickly to new circumstances. Once accustomed, what once thrilled us becomes ordinary, and the mind turns toward other goals. This cycle leaves many feeling as though they are running endlessly without satisfaction. The Buddha pointed out the nature of this phenomenon
thousands of years ago when he taught that all feelings are impermanent. Joy, if dependent on external conditions, will quickly change when those conditions change. If the mind is always seeking new stimuli to sustain happiness, it is like a thirsty person drinking seawater. The more they drink, the thirstier they become. The way out is not to try to make positive feelings last longer, but to change how we understand happiness. Through mindfulness practice, we see that happiness is not only in moments of excitement, but also in calmness, in the ability to be fully present with life as it is. Hedonic adaptation reveals that the mind naturally returns to its equilibrium, and the Buddha's teachings show how to raise that equilibrium through compassion, wisdom, and letting go. When the heart is wide enough, external changes no longer shake us deeply, and joy no longer depends on rare events, but flows gently through each day.
Excessive focus on personal achievement, whether in career, fame, or other individual goals, can quietly erode happiness without us realizing it. When all our effort is poured into proving ourselves, the mind easily falls into tension, comparison, and the pressure to maintain an image. Success should be a resting point, but when it becomes a new standard, it turns into a burden, forcing us to climb ever higher to avoid falling behind. Each accomplishment sets a higher bar, keeping us in constant pursuit and rarely allowing us to feel complete. Psychologists call this the cycle of escalating expectations, where the benchmark for happiness keeps rising with each milestone reached. As a result, even with more success than before, we may feel just as lacking as when we started. Moreover, focusing too much on the self diminishes the ability to connect deeply with others, as every relationship is measured through the lens of personal benefit. Loneliness can creep in even in a crowd because there is no genuine bond or trust. By contrast, research in positive psychology and neuroscience shows that altruism, compassion, and community connection can nurture long-lasting fulfillment more effectively than pleasure or status. Helping others triggers the release of oxytocin and endorphins in the brain, creating feelings of warmth, trust, and satisfaction. Unlike the short-lived joy from personal achievement, the joy of giving is often deep and enduring because it is tied to a sense of meaning. Humans are social creatures built for connection and cooperation. When we isolate ourselves from the community in pursuit of individual goals alone, we go against this natural design, which can lead to emptiness even at the peak of success. Over 2,000 years ago, the Buddha taught that true happiness cannot be separated from compassion. Compassion is not mere sympathy, but a deep understanding of another's suffering, coupled with a sincere wish to help them be free of it. When we live with compassion, we no longer measure happiness by what we gain, but by how much we contribute to easing the world's suffering.
The satisfaction of helping others does not depend on external circumstances,
because it arises from an inner source, untouched by gain or loss. The Buddha emphasized that the joy of compassion and connection is not swept away by the impermanence that governs sensory pleasures, because it requires no conditions to exist. In the modern world, where the competitive current pushes people to chase achievements relentlessly, practicing altruism and building community bonds becomes medicine for both mind and body. It frees us from the obsession with the self and reminds us that we are part of a vast web of life where all happiness is interconnected. Sharing joy and carrying each other's burdens creates a form of happiness no amount of wealth or fame can replace. Giving and connecting also build inner resilience, enabling us to face adversity with strength. Those with deep, supportive relationships recover more quickly from hardships because they feel held by the community. The difference between personal achievement and the joy of connection lies in the direction of mental energy. Personal achievement focuses energy on attaining a specific outcome, and when that outcome loses novelty, energy wanes. But when we direct our energy outward through altruism, it is continuously renewed, because it is based on mutual exchange and nourishment. Like a candle lighting countless other candles without losing its own flame, compassion and connection only enrich us. They never diminish. Ultimately, both psychology and Buddhist wisdom agree that a happy life cannot be built solely on the foundation of personal achievement. Such achievements have their value, but they become complete only when placed in the context of relationships, when they serve as means to share and spread benefit. A soul that balances self-development with community contribution will find peace even when no longer at the height of fame, because their happiness no longer depends on the ups and downs of external success.
The core wisdom of Buddhism begins with a simple yet profound truth. Life is inherently bound to suffering. The Buddha called this the first noble truth, dukkha, one of the four noble truths that form the foundation of his teachings. Suffering here is not only physical pain, but includes all forms of dissatisfaction in the mind, from the obvious, birth, aging, sickness, death, to loss, separation, disappointment, and the unease of unfulfilled desires. Even when we obtain what we want, we still suffer, from fear of losing it or from realizing it does not bring the happiness we imagined. This is the impermanent nature of all things, and the reason the human mind is always unsettled. The Buddha pointed out that the root causes of suffering are craving and ignorance. Craving makes us cling to what is inherently unstable, while ignorance keeps us from seeing the true nature of life. Without understanding this, we believe the purpose of life is to enjoy as much as possible, to gather pleasure, wealth, status, and experiences. But that path leads only to the endless cycle of desire and disappointment. The Buddha's teaching reminds us that the ultimate purpose of life is not enjoyment, but liberation from suffering. This liberation does not mean avoiding or denying life, but living within it without being bound by it. When the mind is illuminated by wisdom, we see that suffering is not an enemy, but a teacher pointing the way to letting go. Suffering helps us realize the truths of impermanence and non-self, leading us to release our attachments. The path the Buddha taught is the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are not mere theories, but practical methods to transform suffering into peace. In practice, we learn to see life with mindful awareness, accepting what comes and goes as a natural part of existence. Then, even in the midst of change, we can remain at peace. Liberation does not come from making everything around us perfect, but from a mind no longer ruled by greed, anger, and delusion. Once we taste this freedom, we realize that happiness is not a state of excitement, but a deep, quiet stability. And with this peace, we can live more fully, love more deeply, and help others find their own path to liberation.
In the Buddha's teachings, the Four Noble Truths are the foundation, a map for anyone who wishes to understand and transcend suffering. These truths are the truth of suffering, dukkha. Life is inherently bound to suffering. The truth of the cause, craving and ignorance are its roots. The truth of the cessation, the end of suffering is possible. And the truth of the path, the way to bring that end about. These are not dogmas to be accepted blindly, but truths we can observe and verify in our own lives. When we understand the first truth, we are no longer shocked or resentful of difficulties, knowing that suffering is an inevitable part of the human condition. When we grasp the second, we see that suffering is not merely the result of an unfair fate, but largely arises from our own minds, from attachment, desire, and the failure to see the impermanent nature of all things. The third truth offers hope, telling us that the ending of suffering is real. This points to nirvana, often misunderstood as a distant place or a realm after death. In reality, nirvana is not a location, but a state of mind where the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion have been extinguished. It is complete freedom from the impulses that drive and bind the mind, a state untouched by gain and loss, victory and defeat, praise and blame. Nirvana is not an empty numbness, but a profound clarity, peace, and compassion. Reaching nirvana does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means living fully in it, without being enslaved by it. The true purpose of life, as the Buddha taught, is not to gather as much pleasure as possible,
but to attain lasting inner peace. This peace does not come from having perfect circumstances, but from the ability to remain unshaken even when circumstances change. The way to nirvana is the fourth truth, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. It is a complete path that trains wisdom, cultivates ethics, and develops concentration. Every step taken on this path is already part of nirvana. For whenever the mind is less greedy, less angry, less deluded, we taste a little of that freedom. With continued practice, that freedom deepens, becoming unshakable, until one day we realize that nirvana was never far away, but has always been here, in each breath, in every moment of mindfulness.
The Noble Eightfold Path was presented by the Buddha as a complete practical roadmap, a path that leads practitioners out of suffering and into liberation. It is not merely a set of moral suggestions, but a concrete method for training wisdom, ethics, and the mind. The 8 factors are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right view allows us to see the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless nature of all phenomena, freeing us from blind attachment. Right intention directs the mind toward compassion, abandoning harmful thoughts. Right speech keeps our words truthful, kind, and constructive. Right action ensures that our deeds are pure, causing no harm to ourselves or others. Right livelihood means earning a living in an honest way that does not create negative karma. Right effort is perseverance in the right direction, avoiding extremes and maintaining steady progress. Right mindfulness brings awareness to each moment, clearly recognizing what is happening in body and mind. Right concentration develops deep focus, bringing the mind into stillness and clarity. The teaching emphasizes that the Noble Eightfold Path is not a rigid or dry rule book, but a progressive process of freeing ourselves from greed, hatred, and delusion. As we practice, we realize that the real cause of our unrest is not the lack of external conditions, but the endless cravings within. The Buddha taught that when craving is removed or reduced, the mind naturally becomes lighter, no longer chasing after distant things. It is at that point that true happiness begins to arise, not the fleeting pleasure of the senses, but deep inner peace.
This happiness does not have to be sought in distant places, for it does not come from possession or sensory indulgence, but from understanding and compassion. Wisdom allows us to see that everything changes and nothing is worth clinging to absolutely. Compassion opens our hearts, letting us see that the joy of others is our joy, and their suffering is something we wish to share and ease. When wisdom and compassion work together, the mind reaches a profound state of freedom, no longer ruled by the waves of temporary emotions.
The Noble Eightfold Path is therefore not only for monks and nuns. Anyone can apply it in daily life. When we work with right view and right intention, our relationships become harmonious. When we speak with right speech, our surroundings become peaceful. When we keep right action and right livelihood, our hearts are at ease, free from the fear of consequences. When we persevere with right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, our minds become clear and steady, able to face change without being swept away. The true happiness the Buddha spoke of is not a final prize we receive only after completing the path. It appears in each step we take. Every time we lessen a craving, release an attachment, or cultivate a wholesome act, we taste a little of freedom. This is happiness no one can take away, because it does not depend on having or not having something. And as we continue to practice, that peace grows, becoming a steady foundation from which we can live fully and help others find their own way.
Today, even in a busy world heavily influenced by materialism, more and more people are turning to mindfulness and ethical living as a path to balance. They may not call it the Noble Eightfold Path or see themselves as practitioners, but what they do clearly reflects its spirit. By choosing to live honestly, they are practicing right speech and right action. For pure words and deeds not only preserve personal integrity, but also build trust in relationships. By living generously and sharing, they nurture compassion and loosen attachment to the self, the essence of right intention and right livelihood. By cultivating mindfulness through practices like meditation, conscious breathing, or simply focusing on what they are doing in the present, they are engaging in right mindfulness and right concentration, bringing the mind to the present and easing anxiety. What is remarkable is that these principles hold value not only in a religious context, but also in practical benefits for mental health, relationships, and work performance. Studies have shown that honesty reduces inner stress by freeing us from fear and deceit. Generosity not only brings joy to the recipient, but also triggers feelings of happiness and meaning in the giver. Mindfulness reduces stress, improves focus, and increases resilience in the face of challenges. This shows that the Buddha's wisdom in the Noble Eightfold Path transcends time and cultural boundaries. Even when applied in a secular environment, without religious rituals, these principles retain their power to transform individuals and society. An employee who lives honestly, works responsibly, and cares for colleagues contributes to a healthy environment. A parent who cultivates compassion and mindfulness passes on the ability to live harmoniously and with love to their children. A community that practices generosity and mindfulness reduces conflict, increases trust, and fosters connection. The key point is that whether religious or not, these values nurture a meaningful life. They help people step out of the cycle of chasing only achievements and material gains, bringing them back to what truly matters: peace, love, and wisdom. And as more people adopt mindfulness, honesty, and generosity, the world will gradually change from within, not through an external miracle, but through the mindful actions and choices
of each individual.